Well, to matters very close to home, China and the so-called climate change, which are one and the same thing. Let's get an injection of common sense here. As governments led by the incoherent Joe Biden threaten to go off the rails, in fact, it'll be Earth Day, Thursday US time. Biden will open a 2-day virtual climate change summit. Our Prime Minister is one of 40 world leaders participating. The goal is to, quote, galvanise efforts by the major economies to tackle the climate crisis. Matt Canavan joins me. Matt, thank you for your time. This is disturbing stuff, isn't it? A climate crisis?
Look, Alan, I think it's not so much Earth Day in the next 2 days. It'll be the re-emergence of the Middle Kingdom Day. China is just lapping this up. They've effectively been able to hoodwink the rest of the world to adopt a policy that restrains and constricts industry in Western countries and transfers those jobs, that industry, that manufacturing to China. I mean, I cannot believe that we are going along for this absolute scam, and this new net zero emissions by 2050 is a scam. It's a scam because there's no way China's going to meet their commitments, and they're a third of the world's carbon emissions. They're the world's biggest emitter. They are not going to reduce their emissions, yet we will apparently destroy our own industry, destroy our own manufacturing capacity, and still buy stuff from China, of course, still import all the manufactured goods.
Well, they're building...
How could we be doing this?
They're building 227 coal-fired power stations. Carbon dioxide emissions, what, 0.04% of the atmosphere? Do they seriously think we're this stupid? I mean, Scott Morrison is talking about zero emissions. It was net zero by 2050. Now, cut them by 50% by 2030. And as you say, China
That's right.
producing 1/3 of all the global emissions.
Well, look, this started out, the net zero emissions by 2050 started out by some Western countries seeking to distract from their own deficiencies. They'd all committed to reduce emissions by 2020, by last year, under the Kyoto Agreement, and almost all of them failed miserably. I mean, New Zealand over there, ruled by Jacinda Ardern, and likes to preen themselves on the world stage about these issues. They didn't meet their own targets. They haven't really reduced their emissions at all over the last 20 years, nor has Canada and Justin Trudeau.
Why have we got to reduce them, Matt? Why have we got to reduce them?
What do you do? Well, look... Well, Alan, I don't think there's a problem with trying to become more efficient, more effective at things.
Not at all.
But we've also got to think about priorities here. We've got to be about priorities. Maybe 20 years ago it was okay to sign up to this when things were going well and the world was at peace and all those things. Now we can see China continually invading the airspace of Taiwan, refusing to accept international law on the South China Sea, suppressing the Uyghur minority group, and also taking over Hong Kong in contravention of the agreement they had with Britain. We can all see that. And our priority as a nation should be now to keep ourselves strong, to restore our manufacturing capability, to stand up to this threat. Yet instead, we're doing the exact opposite. We are destroying, or potentially going to destroy, our own ability to make things, while helping China continue to grow itself in strength, so to continue to bully and threaten other countries.
Just taking the point about helping China, for the benefit of our viewers, China currently have 1 million megawatts of coal-fired power and a further 200,000 planned. Australia, not 1 million, 25,000 megawatts. And the growing nations, Matt, in our part of the world, China, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, those outfits, they recognise the road to prosperity is cheap, dependable electricity. They've expanded coal mining capacity. Now, here we are providing the wherewithal for them to have cheap electricity, subsidising renewable energy.
Yeah, Alan, you're absolutely right about China's plans. Last year, China did commit to net zero emissions by 2060, and a lot of these greenie activists are out there saying, what a wonderful day. China's joined the club, and we're all on our way to a carbon-free utopia. In the same year, it must have been a shock to Greta Thunberg, who tweeted this the other week. She tweeted how terrible it was that last year, the same year China committed to net zero emissions, China had installed 36.9 gigawatts of new coal-fired power stations. You mentioned we've got about 25,000 megawatts, 25 gigawatts of coal. So China installed almost double what we have in Australia just in 1 year.
That's it.
And yet apparently we're going to take them on face value that they'll do as they say, not
But
worry
there's
about
another
what they
agenda
do.
here. I mean, we're providing $7 billion of subsidies to renewables, which undermines, of course, the competitiveness of coal. And then the Prime Minister's talked about a $1 billion spend for the South Australian electricity grid because it's been made unworkable by subsidised renewables. How do you make sense out of this?
Yeah, look, Alan, this is what we've been doing for 20 years. We've destroyed our energy competitiveness as a nation. We used to have some of the cheapest energy prices in the world, which is what you'd expect for a land blessed with coal, with gas, with uranium. Yet in the last 20 years, we've decided not to use the resources that everyone else desperately wants from us, and instead try to import solar panels and wind turbines from, where do you think? Guess what? China. Install those at great cost and subsidy to destroy our energy network, and yet still export the resources overseas.
And made from our coal.
I mean, how? Yeah. So the wind turbines and solar panels that we import back from China get made in factories that are powered by our coal and gas, and uranium for that matter as well. Yet we deny the use of all of those resources ourselves. We already won't install nuclear power stations. We're fast on the path of trying to shut down all our coal-fired power stations, and there's a renewed attack on gas as well. Yes. So why would we seek to install all these types of power which will make us dependent on another country? I mean, as I say, this climate change stuff is a scam. It's a scam invented in Beijing, not in Paris, not a Paris agreement. It's a Beijing agreement because they will then, China is putting itself in the position, the Communist Party of China is putting itself in a position where the rest of the world will become dependent on energy sources made in China. Whereas we could choose a path as a sovereign, proud nation to rely on energy resources made in Australia, like coal, like gas, like uranium as well.
We've got a stack of it
over the longer term.
And we've got I mean, here in New South Wales, Keene wants to close down 8,520 megawatts of coal-fired power in the next 20 years. Take out 70% of New South Wales' reliable energy with nothing to replace it. Now, Chris Bowen, the Shadow Energy spokesperson, says renewable energy will create jobs. He's right, isn't he? Jobs in China.
That's right. Exactly right. I don't know if you've been to a solar farm recently, Alan. The biggest one up here in North Queensland's a place called Clare, and there are 3 people working there. 3 people. A couple of security guards and a groundskeeper. They're not exactly factories of jobs, except for, as you say, where they're made, which is not here in Australia. And really, what are we going to do as a nation here? I mean, this renewable power, it's really the dole bludgers of the electricity network. They only turn up when they want to work, right? They're not there all the time. They're not there 24/7. Just where the wind blows and the sun shines. We need power sources right now. Now, given the threats we face in our region, that's reliable, that's on 24/7, that works full time.
Well, why are we getting into bed with Biden?
We have all those things.
Why are we getting into bed with Biden? I mean, Bjorn Lomborg, a world authority, said Biden's climate alarmism is almost entirely wrong. And one of the world's leading researchers on the subject of climate, global warming, all this stuff, is the Czech-Canadian Václav Smil. He said the great hope for a quick and sweeping transition into renewable energy is wishful thinking. Why are we getting into bed with these people?
Look, Alan, you'd have to ask those that are pushing that. I think it's a mistake, and I don't think we want to run our energy policy as a country based on the results of the US elections. The US gets to elect its own government, and they can do what they like in the United States. I certainly don't object to that. Joe Biden's their president. He can try to push the policies he chooses to do, but it was only a few tens of thousands of votes difference between Joe and Donald. And if Donald Trump had been elected, apparently we would have had a completely different energy policy here in this country. I mean, I thought we got to decide, Alan, what our policies were in this country. But apparently, why do we need to go to the polls every 3 years if we just do as we're told from Washington or Beijing or wherever it might be? We've got to make our own decisions here in this country. And the last election, we voted as a nation wholeheartedly to reject more aggressive emission reduction targets, which would cost thousands of Australian jobs and hurt our ability to defend ourselves as a nation.
Good on you. Great to talk to you, Matt. Great to talk to you. Gosh, that bloke's a breath of fresh air, isn't he? Senator Matt Canavan. I should say that Michael Schellenberger, who was a global warming activist for 20 years, apologised in July last year for, quote, the climate scare we have created over the past 30 years. He said, once you realise how badly misinformed we've been, it's hard not to feel duped. You can't believe it. These are people we elect. Matt Canavan.